Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm David Duarte, your host for Culture Before Content. Whether you're here live or catching a replay, I'm glad you are here. At Music for All and within the Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. None of this would happen without the support, and we are incredibly grateful for Yamaha, who is our national presenting sponsor, for helping us bring this mission to life. Well, thanks for joining us. If you're watching live, now's your opportunity to engage. Go ahead and comment. Don't hesitate to jump in and contribute to the discussion. We've had so many lately. It has been great. If you want to just say hello, ask a question, share a thought, feel free, and we'll do our best to get it on the show. If you prefer an audio version of this podcast, those drop every Monday. They're usually on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major platforms, so you can stay connected with us wherever you are. If you can always watch us or listen to the full episodes anytime, which is perfect for revisiting key moments or watching at your own pace. For all the latest episodes and past conversations, visit musicforall.org/podcasts. It's your go-to destination for everything culture before content. All right, let's talk about last week. Last week was fascinating. We had Dr. Trey Blanco, director of bands at Butler University. He had a thoughtful and passionate conversation about teaching, music making, and the impact of intentional programming. We spent a lot of time. I'm still on programming from last week. If you're a band director, last week's episode was full of incredible insights that can inspire your perspective. Dr. Blanco went beyond just discussing repertoire. He explored why programming is so important, how to make it more inclusive, and how to connect it to the students you see daily. He shared some practical strategies for planning concerts, spoke openly about learning from others, and reminded us that creating a meaningful culture is something we build intentionally, and it does not happen by chance. Ain't that the truth? All right. I am excited for today's guest. I think you're going to have a great time. I'm excited that we have Mr. Greg Bimm. This is someone who doesn't just talk about culture. He's lived, led, and built it over decades. His name that carries serious weight in music education is one we all know. He is known for his commitment to his students, high standards, and a legacy of excellence that spans concert, jazz, and marching ensembles. Under his leadership, the Marian Catholic Band has earned 7 Bands of America Grand National Championships and over 34 Bands of America Finals appearances. And that's not just on the field. He's also in the concert hall doing successful and the jazz as well. I've been looking forward to this conversation because Greg Bimm brings the kind of wisdom that can help us all on reflection, growing, and refining what we do in the classroom. So please welcome to the show, without any further ado, Mr. Greg Bimm.
Hey, David.
Hey, welcome to the show. I am so excited. And to our audience out there, we've been conversing just a little bit. I had a little bit more time with you today. Sometimes, so we've had a little chance to talk. So, all right, Greg, I'll stop. I'm apparently really good at it today. But why don't you tell us a little about who Greg Bimm is for the 5 people who don't know?
I taught at Marian Catholic High School for 46 years. Taught a couple of years before that in a little school on the other side of Illinois, 5 through 12, and retired 2 years ago. And
Wow.
Have had an absolute wonderful time. Like when you set out to have a career, you envision what you think it might be. Man, mine way surpassed that, and I'm not talking about the frilly stuff, just the chance to be a band director in a great place for so long. I always say when people ask me about that, if I could get my young self back, I would sign up for another 46. I
believe that. I think, we'll keep doing what we do until we don't do it anymore. And retirement isn't necessarily, it's not like we just stop. You're a band director. There is no way you have stopped doing anything. Just curiously, how busy are you now? What kinds of things are you keeping busy with in retirement?
I'm still real busy. I'm writing for a few bands and doing quite a bit of consulting. And I'm not sure. I think I did 3 or 4 honor bands this spring. So I'm staying busy. I'm trying to learn how to balance that, like in retirement. The funny thing that happened was for 46 years, my calendar was tied to the Marian calendar. When school starts, when the vacations were, when my responsible, all of that stuff. So everything else about my life was tied to that calendar. Like I could say, we're going to go on our vacation, or we're going to go and see so and so on the Monday after we play at Superstate or something like that. When I retired, that center anchor of the Marian calendar was gone. Dates have been just floating around. And so people will call and say, can you do this? I go, oh yeah, I can do that. And then I start looking at the calendar and it's just like, it's bumped
Yeah.
up.
Now you kind of have to be a little bit more purposeful on like, oh, I need to give myself a break here, or I can, here's a word that I've learned recently. You can say no. I didn't know that. I thought you had. I thought you had to say yes to everything because that was how you got success in life. But let's backtrack to let's get to the the success of Greg Bimm,
Sure.
because that's really what I envision of like you have tasted success your entire career. You've got. I mean, I would really like to think about what it was like when you started your career to how it has morphed, or how have things changed. You talk about your young self, and what you would do differently. It's almost though, what are some of the things you did when you were young that created the success that you got to retire with? So, maybe talk about the changes that have happened over the time if you're teaching.
Boy, that's a long question.
I'm good at those.
When I started at Marian, it was relatively small. About 60 kids, I guess. That's not small if you're in a really small school, but for a school of 1,500, it's a pretty small program. And the only thing I really had is energy. Literally, like I didn't feel like I needed to sleep very much. I could stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning and get up and be at school at 7 o'clock or 7:30, and I'd do that for a long, long time before I'd finally say, okay, I need a day to sleep. Just because, youthful energy can do that for you. And so the only thing that I had, and I remember saying this, was I only know that I can work hard. I don't know that I know anything or that I'm good at anything. And really, I wasn't. I don't know that I am now, but I certainly wasn't then. And so the only thing I knew was I could try really hard. And no matter what the surrounding circumstances were, whether we had facilities or whatever, the one thing I could control is how hard I could work. But it's not really work, because it's like somebody turned me loose and said, okay, you can do your hobby every day, and that's your job. And so for 46 years, I got to do what I love to do. And I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life, because I've just gotten a chance to play at my hobby. And back then, the question was how things have changed. Back then it was small and I didn't know much. And so it was a great match because I could grow as the program was growing. And that's kind of the biggest thing that's changed. Obviously the facilities, not the facilities at Marian. Well, we do have a band room now, but back then music was written with pencil, and drill was written with pencil. And now they have all kinds of things like Pieware and Sibelius and stuff. And so that makes it's a different thing. Writing drill with a pencil means all of the motion is in your mind. And so everything that I wrote back then, I had to be able to see. Everything that I wrote musically, that's my grandson, by the way. Everything that I wrote musically, I had to hear in my head, because I'm not a good piano player or anything like that. And so the computer stuff has just changed things, because now you can find resources online. Back when I started at Marian, or before, if you wanted to change a drum head, you had to find someone who knew how to change a drum head, or you had to keep a good enough record of your instrumentalists that you could find an article that somebody said, change a drum head like this. And now if we click on the computer that's in front of me, I could find 50 different versions of how to change a drum head. And so the facility, or the ability to find information has just exploded. So.
Oh my goodness, that's changed even just 20 years from 20 years ago. I remember, when I first started teaching, that's why I would tell people back on the land before standards that you were pretty much just told, here's the keys to the band room, go make the band great. I'll see you at the end of the year. And that was
Yes.
pretty much that's exactly what I was, what I grew up believing a band director was. And then over time, boy, did that change quite a bit over time to what we have now. In the end, you're right. I just go do my hobby every day. That tomorrow's my first day off from spring break, and I'm already in my head, I'm already running how I'm going to approach each class tomorrow. It's kind of like the first day of school all over again, but a very one day temporary, get the kids in the focus. But you said something that sparks me on the culture side of things. So when you started off with 60 kids, how long did it take you to get to where you were at more of that caliber of band? Your ability to do repertoire had changed. What were the steps, or what do you think attributed to it? What were the cultural things that you did to make Marian become Marian?
I think there was a schedule change at Marian, which affected things in a way. My first year at Marian, they didn't have study halls. And my second year, they said, we're going to have study halls now. And so I went right to the administration and said, could you please make it so that our second band has a study hall during the time of our first band? And they said, sure. That meant that the two bands could march together during the fall. And that was one of the big changes in culture, because everybody, and we can talk about that because that's a big part of how we compensated for coming from a school with no feeder system. And we can get into that in a minute, but that was a big change. And then one of the biggest things was the literature that we played. We just constantly chose to play high quality literature, and the kids got excited and inspired by what we were playing. You play. Well, I remember we played after about 3 or 4 years. We played the Persichetti Symphony, and the kids loved that. Once they learned it and figured out how it all sounded and how it all worked together, and then the very next year. We played Masquerade by Persichetti, which is a different level of sophisticated listening that you have to do, and so they really love that. And then basically, it was a growth ladder of the literature that we chose to play, and that caused the kids to have a great value over time of playing great music. And the inspiration to play great music also makes you want to play it well. And that inspires you to work hard so that you can play it well. Because playing something, I don't care how good it is, if you don't play it well, that's not an enjoyable process for anybody. And so the kids were inspired by the music that we were playing, and they wanted to play it better and better. And so they worked harder and harder to raise the standard. And that was like literally, you can just kind of follow the literature from, we're playing maybe my second year at Marian, we played Epigon 4 by Robert Washburn and Othello, like I think 2 movements or maybe only 1 movement from Othello by Alfred Reed. And then, you move, all of a sudden we're playing within a couple of years, we're playing Persichetti. We did Armenian dances in there, but we kept raising the level of literature and then playing more and more of that high level literature every year. Like we do a double concert set that was pretty stacked, and both, instead of doing one concert set that's really demanding and then a lesser, we would do 2 demanding concerts each spring. And so that was a key to the center of the band program. And at the same time that was going on, that fed the marching band. One of the things that was fortuitous was in the early 1980s, there was a change going around the country in marching band. Before that, marching bands were basically they just played loud more pop stuff, a lot of drum corps kind of things where woodwinds didn't matter at all. And at the beginning of the 1980s, there was a movement that we really dove into, with making the band sound like a concert band on the field and playing significant literature, like major things. I know in 1985 we played Petrushka was one of the big tunes, and so we played sophisticated literature and tried to play like a concert band. And so the better our symphonic band got, the better the marching band got. And then the better the marching band got, the better the symphonic band got. And so it was this upward spiral of in trying to not even trying, just being inspired to play well and to perform at a high level. And so that creates its own culture when you think about it. There, one real quick thing, one year, way back in the early '80s, we played at the state assessment, IHSA, and there's a sight reading part of that, and it was not good music. That it was just stuff to read. And we were walking out of the sight reading room, and one of my seniors came up and he said, "Mr. Bimm, why did they make us play junk like that?" And I was like, that's a home run for me. And when the kids are looking at it going like, we shouldn't be wasting our time playing this stuff, So that was a major part of our growth and culture, was just setting high standards for ourselves with the literature that we invested in.
Well, besides the literature, though, because this is this is why I love talking to people, because I get this chance to, I finally get to ask you questions one-to-one that I've always wanted to ask. And really it comes down to, I understand, I believe everything like you said, because like I said, quality literature is great. Trying to get your kids to play there is different, but there has to be something with how your rehearsals are, your demeanor, the expectations when they walk in the room. And I always go back to and I think this is where I think I want to spend my next few couple years on, is mission and values. Because I think with those mission, it may not be something formalized, but everyone has to have a set of values that makes the band great. And there has to be that shared values. The neat thing about, your situation is you can teach your kids, and they're there. There's no, you're not in a district. I don't want to say, we'll talk about the private versus public school thing here in a minute, but it really comes down to how do you get the kids to find your value? When did that, did it instantly hit that the kids were off and running, like, we're Greg Bimm, he's our number one, and off we go? Or did it something that changed over time? And what do you think that you attribute that to? How did you get your kids to find your values?
It happened relatively quickly, not the first year or anything like that, but within a few years. And I think part of it is being absolutely truthful with my own values. I think as a director, you have to be completely honest. The music, it became where the music mattered to them because it mattered so much to me. Like, there wasn't a day in rehearsal that I wasn't going great guns at, let's make this as good as it can be. And not in a mean way, just in an insistent way. And, they would probably say he is really stubborn because he's not going to go on. He'll play these two measures for the next hour if we need to. But that's because those two measures are important, and playing it at that level is important. And so I think one of the first parts is making sure that you walk the walk. And, I still care about music. I got scores, all around still here that I, have gathered over the years, that I still go back and look through, just, and so I think part of it is that you have to be, you have to walk the walk, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. And then pretty soon students will adopt that as well. If you're sincere, they're going to be sincere. And, that can take some time. but that I think that's the biggest key. And then it's a matter of consistency too. You talked about, I don't know whether we want to talk about warm-ups, but part of the band culture at Marian is we are sincere about what we're doing from the first minute through the rest of the rehearsal. We don't, do we want to get into that?
I will take the challenge, because again, you keep saying things. I'm like, no, I need to know that answer now too, because again, it goes back to expectation and values. I mean, and
Yes.
because I know it, and it comes back down to like, you have to have expectations as a band director that are pretty set. Because I think I think it's odd when you're interviewing for a job, do you have high expectations? Well, of course I do, but how do you get those expectations to come to reality? And part of it comes with your own musicianship and as you said, hard work. I mean, I used to think that you had to be like this, superstar musician to be a great teacher. And that changed as soon as I got to college, because as soon as you start meeting people that work hard and can do just as much and even more through their rigorous studies or bringing things to the table, that's the thing we want from our students, is we want our expectations, but again, getting them to meet them, I think, is that recipe. And so we can start with one, because I would love to say, when I walk into Marian Catholic, what's the first thing that's going to happen, or what do you believe in? Because you said concert band, marching band should be the same. There has to be a secret recipe that you use that creates that sound.
Well, the approach to warm up and technique kind of things really starts like with our symphonic band. It is there's no set length of time, but it's a very few little bits of exercises. I saw Mike Pote's podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing. I'm going like, okay, well, that we have a certain sequence, and if we have, I'm looking at that, we have time. Okay.
Go.
Okay. The way that warm-ups work with the symphonic band, our top band, is the kids come in, they have 5 minutes to get their instruments out, sit down, they get to play a little bit on their own, and then they have a self-starting thing that they do. They play through all major and minor scales together, and I don't even have to be in the room. Like literally at 11:15, the clock clicks, somebody counts off, and it can be anybody in the band that counts off. Usually they'll find one person that does it every day, but they choose. So however they do it, they start off and they play through all those scales. And then I'll come out, and the first thing we do after that is we sight sing. There's a book called The Treasury of Scales by Leonard Falcone that, yes, or not, it's not Leonard Falcone. Sorry. It's Leonard Smith. Yeah. We just randomly pick a number. The odd numbers are major. The even numbers are minor. The first half of the season, we pick odd numbers. Second half, we pick even numbers, and it's a random pick. And we'll just, we'll play in that key. We'll play the scale. We'll sing the scale. Then we'll play the first note, and we sing straight through no matter what happens, no matter how far away they get. We just sing it, and then we'll play it. And the instructions at that time are, as you play this time, make sure that your horn is telling you where you missed. Like, make note of those places that you had trouble singing. Horn tells you where to go. Then we'll go back. Now this is time number 3. We play the first note, sing the first note, then we'll sing it again, and it's always much, much better. Then we go back one more time, and on time number 4, we play it again. But the instructions there are to make sure that you let your ears tell your horn where to go. Like, what you sang should dictate what you're going to play. And the whole idea of that is it's ear training that gets the kids to hear pitch and direction. And what's funny is with the talk about equal temperament versus whatever.
That was my next question.
they will find that because your ears want you to sing in tune, and so they find it themselves without any kind of an assistant. I'd never had one of those harmony directors, and so this was my way of handling that. And so, but then we had some other things that if I get into, I could take the whole rest of the time going through them. They're short.
We can do whatever we want.
There some things about subdivision, and they're almost game-like, but they're meant to make the kids think and get them involved. And every day is a little bit different. We sing something different when we do the subdivision thing. It's essentially in a nutshell, we play a scale in 16th note. Well, it's 4 beats of 16th notes on each pitch. Essentially,
right?
We play number 1 from Treasury of Scales, and then I'll tell the kids pick a number between 1 and 16, and they'll pick maybe 5, and then I'll say somebody else pick 1, 8, 12, and we'll pick like 5 of them, and I'll say, okay, we're going to play the 16 notes minus those 5, and so they have to think of all the 16th notes. Like if you leave out 5, you hear bup 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 bup. Okay, but we do 5 of them, and because of that, they have to really be involved because nobody wants to play in the middle. You don't want to play in the rest. And we just stretch that a little bit further. Like we'll play it that way. Then we'll play it when we'll only play the 5 that are missing. And then we'll intersperse them. We'll have half the band play the ones that were left out and the other band play the other half play the other. And they have to fit together. So everybody has to subdivide. And then we use the same exercise, the same line, number 1, to do anything that is necessary for whatever piece we're playing, like working on quick articulation. Like if you play deafness and Chloe, you have to play triplets at a very quick speed. And so we'll use that to work on speed. If you're playing the Hindemus Symphony, you have to play square, dotted 8th and 16th notes. You can't let them turn into triplets. And so we'll use that as an exercise. But the whole thing is that first bit, and it can go anything. I mean, like sometimes we'll spend the whole rehearsal just that and tuning and then playing our chorale. We only play the first line, sometimes only half a line of the Bach 16 chorales. Number 12, which is, a lot of people play. That's always been my favorite. So we'll just play the first chunk of that, but we'll play it in such a way that we're trying to make it as perfect as possible. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is the warm-ups are thought about. Like we are thinking as we're doing it. Like this is not a go through the motions of whatever exercise you're on. Like in gym class, we used to have to do jumping jacks. And if the coach wasn't watching carefully, I'd stand on one foot and move my other foot out and just wave my arms like this. Going through the motions, and I wasn't getting any stronger or in any better shape. And a lot of bands do that with their warm-ups. They just think that if they walk through this set of things, it's going to make them better. And it's really the thinking part that makes you better. But when the last little part of this and how we got here is the culture of how you approach things. Since we're approaching warm-ups with such sincerity and such concentration and seriousness, that means that sort of defines everything that we're going to play. Needs to be serious, needs to be thought at, needs to be taken. You try to do the best you possibly can all the time. That was
I'm fascinated. That's all good. I'm kind of fascinated because you got 2 things going on. You've got intonation. By the way, I wrote down pure intonation, and I know you don't have to have a harmony director to teach that kind of thing. And just curiously, do you have a favorite Treasury of Scale? Because I can actually tell you, my high school, we always requested number 9. I don't know why 9 was so popular, but that was like that was my favorite one growing up. I think.
Hang on, is that it? That might be an F. Hang on.
It is an F. I'm pretty sure it's an F.
Hang on.
I don't know why those books didn't translate still into more something, because that's like I own that whole set of those books, because those chorales are great.
There it is. Number 9. Number 9 is an F. Mine is 19.
That was the other one, 19, and I think 50. There was one of the minor ones was great. But for those of you who don't know, Treasury Scales is every scale. Somebody gets the scale. It's 4 parts, and then somebody, part 1, 2, or 3, or 4 has the scale, and it does harmonic minor, melodic minor. great. And again, like you said, because this is what I wanted to get to. That, when you said sing, my heart went, like, it's got like a chill of happiness, because those things that we try to teach kids how to tune all have to happen in from the wind players, have to happen through some type of oral shaping, and then that's not going to happen unless you sing and teach people to adjust. Because I swear, a lot of people tune the band, and then we're in tune, but that's never the case. But the moment you sing, they can hear it and they can tune, and oh my gosh, adjust. Which is, if you don't sing or play chorales, you're never going to make those types of adjustments. Because I think intonation is one of those secrets. And like I said, when you say warm-ups can go as long as they do, I believe it, which is what, I'm sorry, my questions keep getting longer.
That's okay.
My next part is the decoding part of it. Cause like, when you said 5 and 8 and all of things, so, do you have any other decoding things strategies for those warm-ups that you have, or is it, how do you get your kids to read better is my question.
Well, in truth, we get kids from 55 different schools. And so they come in with, a lot of them are from private schools that only get to meet once a week. And so they come in with, basically they're meeting 20% as much time during their grade school time as other public schools do. So they come in with 20% of the experience. And so we have to work really hard at that. But part of that is with rhythms, we can use that same number 1 in treasury of scales, and just build rhythms. But the big thing is, well, there are 2 parts to approach to not so much reading rhythms, but understanding. One is that exercise that I just talked about, the subdivision exercise, because what you're doing is you're just teaching them to break things down. And if you learn to break the rhythms down into their subdivisions, that makes a big difference. We do a thing, I just call it note leading. And it's on the same thing. It's on number 1 with 16th notes, where we just talk about grouping notes together. Like if you have 8 eighth notes, you can group them 5 and 3, or actually what you're saying probably is 3 and 5, but
no, it's good. I see.
Or 5 and 3.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, any of that. And so we'll go through and I'll say, okay, we're doing 16th notes. Let's do 9 and 7, because there are 16 notes. And so they'll play D, da, 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 da. And then right after that, the next 7 notes are the lead in to the next measure. And it's we try to make it really subtle so that we don't overact it out. We just think about it. But when you're teaching really difficult rhythms, when you're trying to play to get the ensemble to be really tight in a difficult rhythmic circumstance, people need to play the rhythms with the same inflection. And we talk about how those inflections work. That's why in jazz you sing so often. This is this way we want that to sound. Or you listen and you mimic that thing, because you can't really notate swing exactly, and so it's the same thing with concert music. A lot of times the key to playing together is just knowing exactly how the inflection goes. Like these 3 notes lead to the next 2 notes, or instead of just trying to play them exactly in time. Exactly in time is important, but you play them exactly in time with an inflection where they're going somewhere or landing somewhere. I don't know whether I'm saying that clearly, but
no, you are. And my question then becomes, at what point does it transfer from what you know to the students understanding it, and then they know? Because to get your bands to play at the level that yours does, it's not a recipe. You can't just magically create this. But once you get to the promised land, there's got to be some handover down to the students, and the students have to have how much of this is student knowledge, or when does it become student knowledge? How do you get some of that transfer in there?
I think that the transfer happens during that warm-up technique time. Because we're doing it so often, it's never the same. So they don't get to relax their brains. They're always thinking. And because of that, the transfer to them, they just naturally start thinking that way. We look at a rhythm, and they'll start saying, okay, how does that how's that going to go to the next time I see something like that? How does this feel? And they start to play with an approach towards that note leading, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Right.
But honestly, that's one of the big things from an ensemble standpoint is making sure that the ensemble all has the same interpretation of what rhythms are. And that can be sometimes it has to be the director, because it's a sophisticated choice. You know, how do you look at something in Masquerade and say, okay, you hand a flute player their part to Masquerade, they don't know you have to help them put those pieces together, but they already start thinking that way after you've repeated it after you keep the same approach over time.
Yeah, well, gosh, well, you said Armenian dances back there, and automatically it took me to the the 5/8 section. It's all feel. You can count it, but if you count it, it's at your detriment to how the style is supposed to flow, because it's a dance. And so if you're gonna, and then that's what I'm hearing is it's just at that point your kids can interpret and can feel. And then my thing though is, how do they pass it down? Is it something that has naturally, like when you're top ensemble? Is it something that's an incentive for the second ensemble to get to the top ensemble? What kind of, how does
this is tied to how we survive with such a broad spectrum of students, and it goes back to actually it would have. I could tell you where it goes back as far as the section leader idea goes, and that's 1982. Told this story many times. We were at Summer Nationals, and L.J. Hancock. I had the Norwind band at Summer Nationals, and they were awesome. And L.J. was doing such a great job with them. They played up a storm, and I think they won Grand Nationals that same fall. But I was trying to learn. I'm going around watching everybody and see how they do stuff. Well, they had an adult for every section, and I knew that there was never going to be a time at Marian that we were going to be able to afford having an adult at every section, and so we started handing off leadership responsibility to section leaders, where the section leader, we'll just talk marching band first. The section leader was responsible for the learning and organization of their entire section. The section was broken into squads of 4, because that's how I learned to write drill. But I still organized the band in 4, even though you didn't see squads like Bill Moffitt stuff anymore. But the sections were organized in squads, and one squad leader was also the section leader. And they were responsible for organizing and teaching the rest of the section. Each squad had a squad leader that was like the assistant to the section leader, essentially. And so through the whole band, we had upperclassmen, like kids who had played in symphonic band or kids who had been in the band program. And those positions were always given to seniors first. It was never we're going to vote for this guy, or we're going to have them write papers on who wants to be section leader. It was always the ranking performer, or the ranking player, or the ranking senior player in the section was the section leader. And so that we took away the emotional favorite kind of stuff, like
right.
their teacher's pet kind of thing. We took that away completely. It was just simply the person who played the best in the senior class, that was the section leader. And then we would assign the rest of the seniors as squad leaders. And then if we had to, we'd get a couple more juniors. And they were responsible for running sectionals with our guidance. That's kind of a long story too. We gave them sheets that they needed to fill out and stuff. But it started with us just saying, Tim, he was our trumpet section leader in 1984. Tim, practice this section. Just go over there. We're going to take 15 minutes, work with the section there. And they gradually grew to where they were running the entire sectionals and the directors were simply resources. We'd walk from section to section and just say, you might want to watch that, or Mr. Bimm, we can't figure this out. Can you watch this for us? But it rested on their shoulders. And so all of the stuff that the upperclassmen were learning over the course of those 3 years, freshman, sophomore, junior year, they were passing on to the juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. And so it created this long continuum of, you were talking about culture. It wasn't just, this is how we want to play in tune, or we have to get this together. That's all part of it. And there's another little side to that too, but that was all part of it. But also they learned how to practice, and they learned the culture, they learned the values. It wasn't me telling them to value stuff. It was upperclassmen who valued it already, exhibiting that that it was of value and needed to be cared for. And that's why, the culture was thick through the entire band. And I'll tell you a funny story, or an interesting one, I think. Our band room in those years was only 40 by 40. And we ended up with, the last year that we were in the 40 by 40 room, we had 280 kids. And so we had to practice in the theater. And so the kids would be in the house of the theater, in the chair, out in the seats, and I'd be on the stage, and I'd conduct from the stage. Honestly, the front ensemble would often be behind me, but I'd conduct from the stage. But I would come in from the band room. I would come in from the house side of the theater, and I'd walk down the aisle so I could get to the stage. The kids are all playing and warming up and stuff. And as I'd walk down the aisle, they would see that I'm there, and so they'd start to get quiet. By the time I got to the stage, they were completely quiet. I didn't think anything about it. They just, I didn't tell them to be quiet. I just waved my hand, but when we got our new band room, they carried that same thing into the band room. And so it became a tradition which still exists, that when anybody walks out of the office, the whole band room can be full of 280 kids playing and warming up. Somebody walks out of the office, and you immediately, you'll hear shh, shh, and the whole band will just stop. It just goes dead quiet, and they'll look to the office and see what's going on. Same thing can happen with a drum major. If they step on the podium, everybody goes shh, and they listen to the drum major. And that was something that I never asked for, and I never built. It was just a part of the culture that grew among the students, and it still is there. One of my favorite things that would happen from time to time is somebody would come in, like our principal would come in, and one of the sisters, and the whole band would be playing and talking and getting ready and stuff. We'd be in the office. The principal opens the door at the front of the room, and the whole band stops and looks at her. and they would freak out. Like the administrator would freak out, because they're used to walking into a classroom and not getting any attention at all, or worse yet, going to a pep assembly that they can't get the kids to be quiet. And they walk in the band room, and 280 kids immediately get quiet and just look that direction, and they'd say, "How do you do that?" And I'd say, I didn't do that. It just grew. But that's an indication of the culture that caused kids to care, to work, because they cared enough to be quiet. They cared enough to stop what they were doing. They cared enough to quit talking about whatever they were talking about. If they cared enough to follow that small thing. That was just an indication that they cared enough to practice. They cared enough to meet big challenges, because some of the times you pick something that a piece of literature that's really going to challenge them, and they have to be committed enough to step up to the challenge. And that was part of the Marian culture that just grew. But the getting quiet thing, I still love that. Every once in a while I'll go over and visit, and it's like quiet. So
I think all of us would love to have that, instilled when you walk into a band room. And that's maybe the question, because we can start talking about the differences, especially how you recruited your band program, or if you said 55 different schools, and the differences between the public and private. But how, either it's luck or purposeful, or just the culture of your classroom. So I attribute that success to you. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about your program now, and maybe how the differences between the public and the private school, how you built it, or some of the things that people think are different but really are the same, or maybe some of the things that people think are the same but are completely different.
different and the same. The big thing, obviously, we got kids from 55 plus different schools. We never knew how many. We never knew who they were going to be. We got a list of kids that tested, and then we got a list of kids who had signed for classes, and then we would get a list. That list would constantly change, essentially all summer long. And so I did generally have a finalized roster until the second week of band camp in the fall, and that's when I would start writing the drill. And so it's a very different world that you can't predict. We could not. We couldn't set instrumentation. I have a friend who had a middle school band director who was just wonderful. And this guy would go through, for the beginners, he'd go through all of the fifth graders' grades. He'd find the smartest bunch of kids and get one to play the trumpet, one to play the clarinet, one to play the oboe, one to play the bassoon. And so the high school director once said, "Greg, every year I get a soloist on every instrument." And we never got that. We had to create French horn players and oboe players and bassoon players, and so we had to adjust as we went, and that was just part of the expectation. It's a very different thing, but it's a very doable thing. And the kids took great pride in coming in as a saxophone player and ending as an oboe player, or a scholarship oboe player or something, or coming in as never played before and starting as a beginner, and then they got playing very well. And so that's one of the biggest differences. One of the other challenging differences is how much money we didn't have.
And that's probably where I'm more alluding to, is how you built success without financial resources, or even capital resources.
The picture that's up right now is one of my favorites. That's my 14-foot wooden ladder.
Goodness.
If you looked at the braces down below my feet, they're held together with nails that are bent. But if you look at the light pole next to me, there's a little. You can see that the ladder is tied to the light pole so that it won't fall over. And that was when we couldn't get into the field. That was on the asphalt. That was where I rehearsed, when we were on the asphalt. And in truth, we could have done probably something else, and we tried a couple of things from time to time, but there's something that when you're at that level, when you're working your own hands, standing on a 14-foot wooden ladder saying, okay, we're in 4 months we're going to be at Grand Nationals competing with whoever, just on this same field with people who have. There's a value in finding a way to get the job done, and that started right away. My first year at Marian, they had a set of, they called them Timp Toms back then. They were these gigantic trio of drums that I don't know how you could possibly carry, but I had two kids that I needed to play I only had 3 snare drums, so I had 3 snare drummers. So I wanted to create something, and we had a set of rototoms. And so with a 2x4, I built a rack for the rototoms, and then used their braces for shelves to create a body thing, and then put straps over the kid's shoulders so that the thing was strapped on the bottom, and then over the shoulders, those old drum straps, for lack of a better way of saying it, that held the thing up with 2 big eye hooks. And he played rototoms so that we could, over the years, we just got by with that. Now, on the positive side, there's no bureaucracy in a Catholic high school, or at least there wasn't at Marian, and that fit me just really, really well because even here in like when I was still there in 2015, if I would have wanted to take the band to China, I could have gone on any morning with no notice, no appointment. I could go down, knock on the door of the principal. At that time, his name was Steve. And I could just walk in. Steve, I really would like to take the band. We're thinking about taking the band to China next year. And, he wouldn't just say yes, though he would lean that way because they knew the band program and stuff. But he would, he might have a couple of questions, but I would always say, this is how we're going to handle it. This is who's going to be able to go. This is how we're going to take care of the finances, all of that kind of stuff. So I'd answer those questions. Bottom line is he could say yes. And at that point, that was the definitive yes. There was no school board, no superintendent, no anybody else that had to agree or approve. I didn't have to make any other proposals. It was just that. And so there was very little bureaucracy. And so that gave us the ability to move and do things very abruptly, just with whatever was best for us. We could make that happen very quickly. Another plus is in public school, all of the school and instruments are owned publicly. And so you can't just get rid of them. You can't sell them. You can't trade. In a Catholic school, the school owns the instruments, but it's not a publicly owned instrument. It's the school owns it, and the school trusts me. And so if we had two French horns that wouldn't be right, but let's just say that I had two French horns that I didn't need, and somebody had a marimba that we needed, we could trade for the marimba, or I could sell the two French horns and buy the marimba, whatever, however, but we were able to make things happen very, very quickly compared to what public schools are, so we could be, I think is the best word, and so we could make up for things by being agile and able to move and agile, and we ended up building a lot of stuff. They still build their own props for the most part. Every once in a while, we've fallen into being able to buy something, but.
Just think you could trade for props too. I mean, that's the big thing to me about
absolutely.
About building those shows is every year's got a whole different theme, and then it's like, I have this idea about these large 80-foot trees,
Right.
but I was just thinking, my last thought is going to be, there are small behaviors that define the culture of a band, and you definitely hit on a bunch of them. What would be like a cultural thing in your band room or your students or yourself that you believe in has contributed to your success?
Well, being in a Catholic school, we could talk about truth and we could talk about belief in a way that you wouldn't be able to talk in a public school. And I think that certainly is a part of things. But this is sort of what I said earlier, that the students over the years grew to believe that they could accomplish anything. And I'm not talking about accomplishing means they thought that they could win anything, because we never talked about that. We just did not. The goal was to do your absolute best. And I would tell the kids, if you do your best, that is all you can ask. You can't, I'm 73 and I'm about 6 feet tall. If I wanted to join a basketball team, I can't imagine, and somebody said, okay, Greg, we're going to throw you the ball. We want you to dunk it. I don't care how many times I go to the court and practice. I'm not going to dunk the basketball. That's just not that's not in my cards. And so I could go though, and I could try as hard as I could. And so the point is, you do your absolute best. What I would also tell the kids though is, people underestimate their best. Like they'll reach a certain thing and say, that's as good as I can be. No, it really isn't. If you dig a little bit deeper, there's a little bit more there. And when you have a room full of people, especially kids, who are all trying to do their best, they elevate each other. And the best turns out to be way more than what they expected it to be. And that was always the goal. We would finish a performance, whether it was with a symphonic band or our freshman band or the marching band, and we would evaluate how we had done, and it was often, we talk about questions like, what if we could go back and do that again right now, what could you do better? If we had 15 minutes, what would you practice so that you could do that better? We got another performance next Friday. What can you accomplish between now and Friday to make that better? And so we would talk about that. And sometimes it would be words too that would just say, yeah, you won that contest, but that doesn't make you any better than you were when you walked off the field, or you finished lower than that doesn't make you any worse. And we live by that same rule, which helped to keep competition from defining us.
That is a great thought process. Now, here's my scary question of the day. We have hit the 56-minute mark, and so here's the whole thing. I could do a whole other hour on truth versus belief, and we could go through, because I'm a big believer that the belief is what gets you through, not despite the truth. And we can leave that for a further comment later. But I want to get your final comment on culture yourself. What, to our audience, to our listeners, what's your final thoughts about culture?
Who the band is, like who you are every day, and who you learn to be every day as the group, as individuals in the group, is the significance on two sides. One, the culture, like who the kids learn to be, how they learn to be truthful with themselves. We talk about doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Like I would use the example, you're walking down the hall and there's a teacher there, and somebody has thrown some paper on the floor, and the teacher is there, and you pick up the paper because the teacher's going to see you and say, hey, that was really nice. Walking down the same hall, nobody's there, the paper's still there. Do you pick it up? And if you do, who has accomplished more? In truth, in my opinion, the person who picked it up with nobody watching has accomplished more, because they did it and they own it. They didn't do it for something else. But the culture, when you work on things like that, the culture will create in the kids the ability to achieve at a much higher level. Like there'll be a higher level of performance, but a higher level of truth in their performance. But that also is a huge part of what they carry with them as they go on. And I've had kids. I've still got a minute.
You can keep talking.
There's a story that I often tell, that and I won't tell the whole story now, but essentially there was a maintenance guy who worked in the band room. He was the night maintenance guy. And when I was first teaching at Marian, I was single for a year, and so I would be late at the band room a lot. And so we got to know each other. And in truth, he would vacuum the floor, and his vacuum, if I remember, played a concert E flat or something like that. And I'd play along with him. But there was an event where he was forced to a construction worker had made a really bad mess. And I won't get into the real specific things, but he was forced to be the one to clean it up. And I talked to the mess that the construction worker made was completely inexcusable. Like, he didn't need to, he could have, and so the construction worker had chosen that he was going to leave the responsibility of cleaning up his mess to somebody else. And here is our maintenance worker, who is completely innocent of anything, having to clean that mess up. And we talk about that imbalance of power versus no power, or taking on personal responsibility. If that's in a nutshell, that's awfully short, I guess. But that person, I mention him by name to our kids. And if you mention, actually, his name is Lee Porter, was Lee Porter. And if you talk to any Marian band kids from many of the years that I was there, you say Lee Porter, and they know exactly what that means. They know exactly how the inequities work and being responsible, that kind of thing. Feeling that's a long story, but the kids know that, and they carry that with them. I've had kids over the years will call back or send me an email and say, "Mr. Bimm, I'm working at this company and so and so, and I'm in charge of this." And they would say, "I wish that they had been in band," or they'll say, "I wish that they had known the Lee Porter story." And so that culture of being personally responsible, and caring about those simple things, that's what expands into being able to perform at a high level and to be high level, high quality folks.
I think we need to have another podcast called Philosophy Before Culture, because I think I could talk to you all day about these beliefs that you have, and just I would love to. This is my thing. You're not teaching anymore, but I always say, if you're out there listening, go observe people and learn, because this is the things that I asked me, the younger self. I regret not going. I've known about you for forever. I should have flown out and just watched a rehearsal, and then I should have. All these opportunities that are missed, but oh my gosh, you have been an absolute pleasure to listen to today, and I hope everyone
You're very
takes
kind.
away.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to, share your email out there with everybody.
Sure.
So if you want to get in contact, and I say this to my audience all the time, talk to these people. We talked about this before the show. I emailed Greg because I did one of his shows like 20 some years ago, and he emailed me right back, gave me some great insight. Matter of fact, I just remembered it was something in the drill that you said, make sure it was something about sound, and it was a long time ago. Anyway, his email is gbimm1@aol.com. So gbimm1@aol.com.
Yes, I'm still on AOL.
And it's okay to be on what you can be, whoever you want to be, Mr. Bimm. You can use AOL. I haven't had my AOL for a long time. I don't even remember what I have now. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really am serious about that philosophy thing, because I think there's more to what you say. There's more. I have so many more questions that are less culture and more just philosophy on teaching, because I think you are just a treasure trove of belief and an example for all of us to follow. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, here we go. We're so glad that you could join us today. If you're watching, please share it on your social media. You can even put in a comment later. And this is just a friendly reminder that you can explore our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. But you can also go to musicforall.org/podcast and find all of them. And I want to thank my fantastic team here at Culture Before Content, and for all the help today from Simone. Thank you so much for being an amazing person today. You can contact me at david.duarte@me.com. That was from my AOL. Just saying, Greg, if you're back there listening, I switched over to the Apple one. Anyway, thanks for being a part of our culture today. I hope you had a fantastic show, and I hope to hear you all, see you all, and be with you all next week.